isn't anybody?
No worries. No worries at all from me.
It just happens.
Okay, so who's first on our agenda?
Okay, first on our agenda is Vince Aluzzi.
Okay.
And Steve Howard, you snooze, you lose. So he is upstairs lobbing on something else.
He's on his way.
This feels strange.
I know. It's like, it's almost like a reverse universe, an altered universe.
It is an altered universe and sort of funny. It's great. Happy switch. For those who are not in the know, Michael used to lobby this committee a great deal, and Vince was chair.
Right.
So can I tell an anecdote?
Absolutely.
We like anecdotes involving Vince Aluzzi.
I would love to hear
He's
it.
probably heard this before. The committee may have even heard it before. I played golf a lot with a guy named Bill Reedy. He used to be a lobbyist for the state colleges.
Was he Liz's husband?
What's that?
Is he Liz's husband?
No, but he's George Reedy's son.
Press secretary for Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah. And we always play together. He usually beats me, but I go to the range and I practice like a half hour, 45 minutes. He just goes right to the first tee. And he hits it right down the middle and I hit it into the woods. And he always says to me, Michael, practice is overrated. So coming here are opposite sides of a higher ed issue. And I've got my votes all lined up, but he comes in and he wants to testify, and Vince lets him testify. And there's this Supreme Court case, and there's this, and wait a second, I got another Supreme Court. Vince takes the vote 4-1 against him. I said, Bill, testimony is overrated.
That's a great story. That is a great
We had a
story.
lot of fun. I think it was more fun in that era. You know.
We have a lot of fun.
Yeah,
We're having donuts.
It was fun.
I'm sure one day, I think about 2 years ago.
One day, 2 years.
That is gross and unfair. We had a lot of fun. Okay, so speaking of fun
Yes.
and work,
Yes.
we are looking at our workforce development bill, H703, and we are looking at a section that the Vermont State Employees Association has raised some concerns about, and so we'd love to hear what your concerns are.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, members of the committee, for allowing me to participate. Steve Howard is upstairs in House Corrections and should be down momentarily. I have been, knowing how time is precious, I have truncated into 4 bullet points the points that I want to make today, recalling we represent approximately 6,000 employees of state government, the classified workforce, which the state of Vermont endorses as the way in which the dominant number of services should be provided to Vermonters and others, that is with a classified workforce. H703, as passed by the House, includes a provision which our members are fearful may take bargaining unit work out of the bargaining unit. And that's the term of art in that we don't want to see work privatized. It's the dagger in the heart of the folks who go to work every day, pandemic or not, and try to deliver and execute the policies that the General Assembly sets. One particular provision, and I recognize former Deputy Speaker Tom Cheney is on the phone. That was his nickname in our era. Advance Vermont is an organization for which he is now, I believe, executive director. The House version of the bill takes action which we believe will take work traditionally done by state employees or which can be done by existing state employees and assigns it to Advance Vermont. And our concern is that any work that Advance Vermont is seeking to do is work which the state employees in the bargaining unit can and should perform. So that's point number one. A related point number two is that the House version contains a $150,000 appropriation to DSAC for Advance Vermont to carry out those duties. If I understand it correctly, it was not requested by the administration, not requested by DSAC, However, the House chose to add that sum in the House version. And as noted a moment ago, state employees believe that that work can and should be done by the classified workforce and not contracted out. Third point, I've emailed some of you about this week, and that is the fact that the regional DOL offices are not functioning as they did before the pandemic. We believe that in order to execute the policies that this committee recommends and which are enacted into law, there needs to be a 40-hour-a-week, 5-day-a-week operation. And as I emailed you, some offices are open part-time, some are open by appointment only, and folks who are unemployed, perhaps down and out on their luck, for whatever reason, not in the workforce, really need to be able to access state government as they do other services, the Department of Taxes, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the regional Act 250 offices. And so we believe that those offices should be resumed to 40 hours a week, five days a week, 40 hours a week. And finally, there are new positions that are added in the House version of the bill. I think the administration requested 9 new positions. The House version creates 4 new positions. We just wanted to ensure that the committee maintains the fact that they would be classified state employees and not contracted work, which is a dagger in the heart of our organization. So that summarizes the response that we have to H703 as passed by the House of Representatives. That's pretty much the sum and substance of my testimony.
So that's outside of section 39, which is what your first 3 bullets are about. The 9 positions are obviously not in section 9, they're elsewhere.
Right.
So your concern is that any new positions be classified with it, some of them may be exempt.
Right. And right, because that's the best way to ensure a steady, even application of policy with a workforce that is part of a team that allows it to work in an integrated fashion and not contracted out.
So I never understood when in the budget bill or something as an authorization for a new position, they sometimes denominate whether it's classified or not.
Well,
Okay, so
yeah.
it doesn't say classified, they can go contract out with that money for a third party to do it?
If the language is clear, I have to look at it. I don't have it in front of me at the moment. It needs to clarify that the new positions are authorized. And that way, it's a way to ensure that it's not contracted out work.
So each section, I mean, you're talking cumulative 9 positions. I don't have all of those 9 positions in my head at the moment, but it's a mix of positions. Some are in state government, some are out. And I just would have to get, to answer your number 4 point, I think we have to all be clear on those positions. Yeah, Keisha?
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, I just wanted to address your first 3 points.
Sure.
So your first 3 points is, if this work had been done, we wouldn't need to be asking Advanced Vermont to set up my futures VT, which they have done, and it's really good. And the objective, as you know, is to get it finished and probably do a handoff to AOE and DOL once it's finished. It is great. I would encourage all of us to take some time to go on that website that they have created. A one-stop shop is what we had been sold by DOL years ago, to that all these regions would have a one-stop portal, which would have all these services and which would be exactly that kind of a regional go-to place for everything from job training to scholarship availability to jobs available. That has not happened, Vince. So in lieu of that, I think this modest investment in finishing a very useful tool for people to access what training is available for what kinds of jobs you might be looking at is worth getting that finished so that it can be shared with DOL. And as you probably know, they work very closely crafting this language in-house commerce to satisfy the concerns of DOL.
Well,
Well, that was the
I don't,
testimony we got.
you're right. I don't think DOL requested it in its budget submission. I think it was advocated for in the committee, and then the chair directed the parties to try to come to some agreement. I think that's how it played out.
So I have a question on that too. It seems like Advanced Vermont has been around for a couple of years.
It
I'm just curious as to, there must be like hundreds and hundreds of contracted positions at state, throughout state government. Why this particular focus on this particular program at this particular time? Have you been lobbying against this ever since its
No.
inception? Or is this the first year you're in saying you want to take over the state employees?
I think it's the first year that I'm aware of it. I don't have the background perhaps that others do. All I know is that the staff is able to do the work, and it was not requested by the administration or the Department of Labor as we started the session. So it was an advocacy request, which was granted by agreement, as everything else is done around here. There's compromise, give and take. But our members tell us that they can do the work. And
But I would think, I can definitely identify with your position, but I would think there's like hundreds of places where you could point to and say, we can do the work.
probably, but for whatever reason, it's either a short-term situation, or there's no staff available, or there's no training in place. Our members tell us they can do the work, and so why contract it out when you've got people who say they can do the work and want to do the work?
So I have two related questions. I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying, your members are saying. It's two questions. I mean, one, DOL has a lot of other places that they're asking for money in this bill, millions of dollars instead of $150,000. That isn't going to restoring service, and I hear you. I mean, if it's inconsistent and you don't realize that the day you go, it closes at 4 instead of 5, you're never
Right.
coming back. So
Right.
I absolutely hear that. What we hear is a strategic move to have the outreach go further out than the centers and, get where people are in case they're not coming to DOL. It's a chicken egg problem if they're not coming to DOL because they don't know when it's open. So I'm hearing that. The other thing that I'm hearing is maybe your members aren't feeling served by Advanced Vermont. They're not feeling like this tool is getting to them in a way that they can help people with credentialing. They're either finding the information themselves, or they have that information already available to them and they don't see the value of this particular tool when they're working with folks. So, I mean, both I think are relevant to understanding, like, we can't kill a mouse with a nuclear warhead in terms of $150,000.
Right.
That doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out, DOL is getting millions of dollars. If the question is, should we direct DOL to restore service, and should we make sure that credentialing is embedded in understanding of how to serve folks? That seems to be the bigger question.
Well, I kind of know how it works here. That's our position as a compromise. And they have to talk to Steve about that. But generally speaking, if there's a language in the bill that says there's, if you're going to choose to go with the 150, that the work will transition to the Department of Labor at the end of the contract period, something along those lines. So
Okay.
this doesn't become a standing contracted program going forward, because that undercuts the work of the classified workforce.
Right, and Advanced Vermont should be looking to put itself out of business and make sure that people like the
Right.
folks in your centers have the information they need to
Right.
to get
Right, so that's the plan, and
say that.
that is that's the understanding, and quite honestly, this is midstream. They've been working on this for 3 years.
Right.
So they are now at a point of finishing it. This is designed to get finished, and I believe that this is, this is designed to get this project finished. And I believe then there will be an eventual handoff, and I don't know when that is, and I think we have to do further work, and we can do that before the end of session probably. It's designed to have a handoff to the state. So I'm not sure we know when that is, but that's the understood.
But does the committee believe that our Department of Labor offices should be open for drop-in?
I want to talk about that.
That's a big issue because
Is that an issue for, I'm trying to understand the difference between contracting and the union contract versus statutory imposition. Why are these offices vacant right now? Are we not funding them enough? Is it a question of money that we haven't directed enough resources? Where do they have the right to close offices under your contract?
Well, it's not,
they have been for years.
that, we had a recession, and I think it may have been the 2000.
It began in 11, and, you know, 8 or 9.
Right, but in this committee, Pat Moulton had been just appointed commissioner. And she was gonna close the Newport office and tell the people in that office to work out of the trunks of their car and go out and see people. And we put a provision in our economic development bill that year, it must have been 2009, that directed that the offices in White River, Newport, I think there was a third location, remain open, and force them to keep them open, because they tried to do this, we're gonna work out of the trunk of our car, and then we're gonna go out and do outreach. And I think it's still the law today, so they keep the offices open, but they reduce the operation of hours. And I can't tell you why they've done that, but our members are complaining that they can't effectively deal with people if they're operating on a appointment-only basis, part-time, at different hours at different places. It's just not the way government
Have they
works.
lost compensation?
What's that?
Have your members lost compensation?
No, I don't think so, but I think it just makes the program more effective.
So it's basically a structural decision by the Department of Labor that they can hire the same amount of people, theoretically can save some money perhaps, and still provide the services. And you don't think they're
I don't
providing
know.
the services?
I can't give you the rationale. Why they're doing that.
I think this is a bigger conversation, one we have to have with Sarah. These offices have been slowly being closed over time or reduced hours.
Are these the whole office or just the workforce capacity office? I think it's local DOL offices, which we used to call DET offices.
But that's also what we're funding here again, is pilot to have those up and fully operational. Where the pilot that we're looking at is coordinating 2 or 3 new pilot, full one-stop shop regional operations. So she wants to go back to the future and get these up and running and effective.
Okay, I just want to be clear. If offices are closed, there's more to those offices than just workforce. People
That's-
going in and filing unemployment claims.
Yeah.
Do they have to wait an extra day to go file, have to drive further?
We don't have the right person here to have this conversation. So I would encourage us to stay on task with this bill.
Yeah,
And those
okay.
are big questions. You may have it.
But
Those
we're
are big,
talking already.
yeah, those are big questions and ones we have to have with Sarah. So that, because I think Vince has sent us, and I can forward unless you sent it to everybody, the restricted hours.
I
And they're
did.
definitely restricted hours.
Senator
And-
Block had a question.
Sorry, Randy. Go.
Have your members provided you with any information as to why the offices have been closed or why the hours have changed? Was there any mention, for example, that this was an outgrowth of the COVID situation, or did this predate that?
If they had conveyed that information, Steve is probably the best person to answer that. All I can tell you is that on the ground right now, it's as I emailed you folks earlier this week.
And
You know,
I
Springfield,
appreciate those.
I'm Springfield not open to the public, Morrisville closed, staff goes 10 times a week. I mean, I don't think it's a good way to run state government.
It's
But
not.
was there an explanation? The key is, was there an explanation that was provided as to why those changes were made?
If there was, I don't know it.
I think that is a key element. We will get that, I'm sure, from the department, but we should also get the feedback in terms of what the employees are saying, see whether or not it was consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is a slightly different conversation than what we're having today. So we've heard you on advance, VT. I appreciate it.
Okay,
And I've got, we're a bunch of minutes behind ourselves. So I'm
Okay.
gonna, if we can, I'm gonna move us along.
okay, great. So I can, I mean, if you call the department, they're the best source.
Yeah, we'll get Sarah.
And
in to
if not, I
testify.
can drag Stephen and maybe catch one of you after you take a break. And
I think having Steve and Sarah together would be great, but that is part of what we're looking at in section 5 in the pilot is getting those up. Those 3 regional pilots back up and going.
But I think also perhaps, I mean, I think Senator Brock said this as well, hearing from someone doing the work directly, because eventually we can't have advanced Vermont live forever, and we need all hands on deck to give people the credentialing opportunities they need to be,
Right.
to help people, you know, get the jobs of the future or whatever. So it would be nice to hear from someone doing the actual work.
We could
about
do that,
where the
but-
gaps are.
We
Well,
could
it
do
would also be an interest, you know, you talk about the genesis of the Advanced Vermont as indicated in this document. Why did this appear this way? Was it because they asked, or was there a perception that the classified workforce could not do this? And again, the question is, that's for the department, questions that we would ask.
right, the only point I can say definitively is that it was not in the governor's recommend, and it didn't reappear to continue until there was a request made of House Commerce, at which time the chair said, try to work something out.
There's lots in this bill that's not in the governor's recommendation.
Right, but that's the one that our
Yeah.
members flagged, and here I am.
You are great. Thank you. Vince, it's great to have you here, and thank you for delivering that message.
Okay,
Come again.
Come again, anytime.
I
Partly
get it.
because it gets great stories that we haven't heard from our chair,
Right,
or from you.
okay.
And
Well, he can tell you about Senator Godnick from Rutland.
I'll punch you in the nose.
He was looking for,
Send them off to find me.
he was looking for
oh my God, Vince, thanks a million.
him. Okay, thank you.
So we're now gonna shift and stay in H703. We're doing 703 for the whole morning. I'm gonna shift to education. And as you know, there are quite a few CTE provisions in this bill. And I think we're gonna pivot first to Deputy Secretary Boucher. And we're gonna look at section 3, which, just to remind you, is the pilot we put in place, what, Heather, 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago?
3,
3?
I believe 3,
3.
maybe 4, given COVID. Let's just say 3.5.
I want to say it was 18. So anyway, it was a while ago. To do this pilot, looking at the thorny issue of the financing between our CTE centers and our high schools, and trying to figure out how to make that work better, how to make the integration of CTE and our sort of what we call mainstream education work more efficiently. So, and that's what this section is about. Finishing that pilot, which had been with AOE. So Heather, I'm going to give it to you.
Can I just say one
Perfect.
thing for the committee's understanding is I think I mentioned this before, I've reached out to Senator Campion, Senator Alliance, Senator Sears,
Right.
and Senator Gray to give us their thoughts on where workforce needs to be addressed in that committee. Because I think what happened in the House is they heard from a lot of different committees as well, and rightfully so. These people are living those substantive areas and probably know a lot of information, so we're gonna have all of them. I mean, Senator Sears has said he's fine with the correctional stuff in here, but Senator Lyons coming in today.
At 11:15.
And Senator, because you said education, but Senator Campion's coming in on Friday morning.
Right.
So.
Right.
We'll
And
have the
some of
benefit of
Senator
their
Campion's
suggestions.
stuff will be financed in the, hopes to be financed in the yield bill. So it isn't all necessarily here.
Okay.
So, Deputy Secretary Boucher, it's great to see you. And
Great to see you.
Wonderful to work on this project together. And if you'd be kind enough to share your thoughts about section 3 as it is now and what we could do to improve it.
Sure. And thank you so much for the opportunity to see you all. I woke up with some cold symptoms. I had hoped to be there in person, but I decided not to risk giving you a plague if I have that. So I hope, so section 3 is in many ways for AOE the most important section because as Senator Clarkson said, we really see this as the really last final piece of us as a state being able to solve our longstanding, we know, challenge around funding and governance. So we do have some concerns with how this came out of House Commerce. We had actually worked very closely with both Kath James in House Ed and Charlie Kimball in House Commerce over the summer to actually tailor the language for this section. And what appears to have happened is it ballooned into something much bigger. And so our suggestion is we actually take it back to what we initially wanted to do, because it really is finishing a halfway done project that due to COVID wasn't able to be finished, and due to, I would say, a lack of ability to fully participate in the pilots from primarily our public CTEs, if you will, than we'd hoped. So I can certainly talk a little bit more about that, but I thought I would actually stick with just some more concrete information that we would argue needs to be fixed in this. So for section 3, the first I guess concern we have is that, and we can't really understand this, but so for some reason, the contract that we need to continue doing this work, and it really is finishing unfinished work, has now been given to JFO, and it's really unclear to us why that would be. We have no problem with, this is not about JFO's competence or ability. We would argue, though, that this particular work, given where we are and how close we are to being finished, does need the expertise of AOE to really finish landing this plane. So we don't really understand why that changed, and we would request that that be, that the contract work go back to AOE. We've done contract work for decades, so we're unsure about why this would be new.
So,
and I think that, but one last point.
That's right away. So you've already been managing this you've had money appropriated to do this pilot. You want to just finish it and have this money appropriated back to AOE and not go to joint fiscal.
Correct. We want to finish the project.
You want to be running this.
Well, yeah, because the way it's written now, it's two things. First of all, the way it's written now is very problematic in our view because it sounds like it's just yet another study. It actually sounds like it's back to the drawing board, and that is not where we are practically. This is not just another study about funding and governance. It's really about defining what is the model that makes the most sense and running the actual fiscal and then governance models to actually look to determine what that would be when we implement it. So I think the language is problematic in general with this bill because it reads as though it's just another study in our view. And really what this is really finishing the work that we started in collaboration with the General Assembly. So it's really problematic for us in that sense. Yeah, I think that's kind of, then the other thing I would say is so the reason it's actually a pretty modest amount of money, which is $180,000, is that was what we initially estimated to do this very targeted next step of the work really cost. And so now it has components about dual enrollment in early college and doing some other, there's I think another piece in there about, let's see, considering the funding in other states. We already know that. We've already done all that work before. We've actually already done what does the funding look like in other states. So we would actually recommend going back to the basics with this, and I'm happy to provide the committee with that language that was originally in H483 that was then folded into 703 to actually keep this very tight, very targeted, and allow us to finally land this plane. I think we're in some danger and risk of actually setting back the clock, and this is not the area we want to set the clock back on in terms of yet another study. This is very critical. It's very crucial. As Senator Clarkson knows, she and I have been in the trenches working on this for at least the last, for me, 8 years. And so we're really, really close to getting this done. And so it's we just really want to actually finish this. We're fine. There was an addition, which is requiring the contractor to coordinate with another study going on, which is on adult CTE, and we're fine with that. We would do that anyway. So I think that's section B under 3. That's fine. So that's my first, biggest set of concerns that we have.
About it. I think Michael has a question for you.
Yeah, so you're basically well along in preparing what is asked for here. Did you get money to do that before?
We did, yes.
How much did you get to do what you were?
I want to say, I don't have the exact figure, but it wasn't like $1 million or anything like that. It was probably a few $100,000. I can go back and take a look. And Jess, who is on as well, might know that. Jess, do you recall, Jess, who is our director of student pathways, is also on. Jess, do you recall the original allocation?
I can pull that up and send that along, but I would say that because it was a grant, we granted to entities, it was actually a very modest amount. And I think that's the other key component. And for the record, I'm Jessica Careless, Division Director of Student Pathways. And I'm sorry I'm off camera, but I'm having some connectivity issues.
Was that money for staff at your agency, or did you use it for consultancy?
No, it was all funding that went to the 3 the entities that participated, received grants. So this wasn't a contract when we received those initial funds. And so I think that's the other piece, is that we've proposed this contract so we can have a little bit more autonomy in our hands on the controls in finalizing the study. Because frankly, I think also looking at having CTE centers who are delivering services also be responsible for investigating funding models, it created, I think, a demand on them that maybe exceeded their capacity.
So, and this came from, was there a joint committee with the Education Committee in the House to make this proposal? I mean, we're seeing, it's remarkable how many instances of this we're seeing where they're giving things to different agencies who are either unaware or not the logical place. It seems like there's a lot of frustration in the House in terms of the jobs that people have accomplished with past money. Did you get any sense that they were frustrated with the pace of your work, that they decided to move on to another entity?
I think that they're frustrated with, potentially they're frustrated with the work, but I think what Jess is saying is that we actually completed the work quite well. We actually ran the grant program. And so what we're now saying is actually, let's do a contract to finish the work that was done in this grant, which we, the General Assembly asked us to run a pilot program that was grants to
this committee asked you. This
yeah.
is
So
because of the failure and we saw it with COVID too, the problems of funding and governance, finance and governance between CTE and Maine high school education. I mean, we have to solve those thorny problems, and that's what this pilot was all about. And the big problem is we only had 3 CTE centers apply to be part of the pilot, and they were all the independent CTE centers. They weren't any of the integrated CTE centers. So part of this is finishing this work and looking at what could be a solution and a model for going forward with how to solve these problems. So just in the interest of time, Heather, I would be interested in seeing language that would scale this back, get this project done, and move forward, incorporating what you feel you can do. I think let's get this one project done, because then we can really tackle the thorny challenge that we have. And if we have a model for how we could do that, that would be great.
Absolutely. And I can get you that language immediately after I'm done here. I have it ready to go.
That would be great. Our drafter is, I'm afraid, very backed up and not well. So I think that that is, that would be very helpful for us. That would be great.
And were there other sections, Chair Sirotkin or Senator Clarkson, that you wanted me to address as well?
Well, is there anything in there that affects AOE or CTE? Yeah, I think we should take advantage of.
Yes, I've asked, I've asked Heather to look at the other sections, and I'm just trying to remember.
Section 13, I think. Section 13.
Section 13 and section 16, and section 16, just briefly. And then we have Erica here happily to address section 16. But we had section, what was the next one, Heather, I mentioned?
First was section 13, I believe.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so section 13 was brand new, was not part of the CTE space in terms of what we'd initially worked on with both House Ed and House Commerce. It came up in testimony once it went over to the full, once it became H703. So our understanding of this is that there are, there's a group of students who is interested, and Jess, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are BBA students, Burton students.
That's one group of students, yep.
Yeah, who are frustrated because they want to take adult CTE classes and there's no way to pay for them. And so that's where this came from. And we're a little puzzled because if these experiences are in a student's personalized learning plan, then that really is up to the local the local school to actually pick that up as part of flexible pathways. So what we're concerned about is that what's really happening is a breakdown in communication between CTE, adult CTE, and sending schools, which has also been a long-standing issue. And so, you know, labor stepped in to kind of run this pilot to dig deeper into the problem. We're fine with that. It really just comes down to whether the committee would like to spend, you know, up to $100,000 to look at this. I think what we would recommend is that when this occurs, they're actually reaching out to us at the AOE so we can actually help them figure out what's occurring. If they're trying to circumvent the existing CTE centers, that is a problem, and we'd want to have a conversation about that. But if it really is just about, we think we don't have the funding, and Jess's team could identify, actually, you do have the funding already, that's covered in the Ed Fund, why would we
This would be
superfluously do something else? And
So
Jess,
you're
I don't know if you want to add anything in. Jess has her hand up, so she may want to add something.
She doesn't need. Jess, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, and I think this might speak to Rockin's question as well, which is we're in the process. We have, the Act 51 adult education and adult CTE study that we are literally developing the RFP with our field partners right now to launch. We're talking about finalizing a study to include the study of governance structures to develop an implementation plan. And my concern here is that this is adding complexity at a time when we're actually trying to resolve complexity. And so I think our other concern, knowing that other CTEs, there are avenues to pay for these individual experiences for students as they make sense as part of their personalized learning plan. Why would we develop a pilot that implicates the very entities that we are currently engaging in studying to try to resolve complexity? We're trying to untie knots, and this sort of adds a new knot to be untied. It might be that through that study, we then come up with a very thoughtful approach because we actually have evidence to suggest that this is a gap we need to fill. We just haven't received that information. We have this very narrow population, and that seems like a local resolution, not a state solution.
Got it. And so you're feeling at the moment, so if I understand you, because I'm just hearing this for the first time, that it's a very specific Burton issue, that if these CT courses are already included in their personal pathway, that the school should be funding them. There's money in the school budget to pay for these, and that would be appropriate. So that adding this is duplicative money and adds up and adds complexity at a time when we're actually doing this pilot that we just talked about in section 3 to try and figure out new models for and better governance and financing. So it strikes me that that is a little bit the cart before the horse.
It does, it is, it's that idea of saying, it doesn't mean that this might not be something that we examine. It just feels premature. And it also feels like it would be implemented in a way that we can't guarantee that there'd be an equitable process like we have in place, you know, and we are still trying to resolve for dual enrollment in early college. It seems designed to a particular subset versus designed for a full population.
Right, and designed for a particular subset and not necessarily needed because there's money there for them.
Absolutely. I would just say there's too many unknowns.
Too many unknowns, okay. That's helpful. So your proposal is to strike section 13?
We would be fine with that.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful. And Heather, if you wanted to tee up, any questions on that? Yes. If you wanted to tee up section 16, and then we can go to Erica, who is one of the few CTE directors who's not on holiday and who's kindly joining us. We're very grateful. But we had very interesting testimony yesterday from Gus Seelig, who runs the VHCB, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, with whom the CTE centers would be partnering to do this quite innovative education project with the career and technical education centers constructing housing in their communities. And it's a big project. It's $15 million of ARPA money. Or maybe it's not ARPA money. It may be out of the 90 million Ed Fund.
I think it's
Ed Fund. Yeah, it's the Ed Fund money.
The surplus, yeah.
Yeah, it's the 90 million in surplus. And this is one of the proposals of a way to use that. And I think we were pretty jazzed by the testimony yesterday. And so Heather, if you tee it up, and then Erica, you could talk about the rubber hitting, how this would actually be used in Hartford.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. I'll start, Erica, if that's okay with you. In general, the administration is very supportive of this. We supported AOE. It's actually not a program that we would run at AOE because it is much more aligned with the housing realm. And so I strongly urge folks to hear from Josh Hanford, who is the Commissioner of Housing, as I'm sure you know, because he has worked most closely on this with the legislature. But in general, we also think it's a really exciting idea. It's exciting to hear that there are some CTEs who would be very interested in this. The only caution it's been important for me to kind of throw out there is I want to make sure that folks realize these are high school CTE students, and so they're not going to be working full-time on building a house. So we're not going to be able to see that, you know, a house is ready to be sold and moving on in, 6 weeks or something like that. This is as much a training and enticing students to remain in the housing and construction industry as much as it is, being able to have a wonderful product in terms of housing at the end of it. So I just feel it's important for me to state that from the education perspective.
So I have a question on that, because when we went through this before, it became obvious that this is not the most efficient way, cost-effective way to build a house, but this was an education program primarily to teach people in the trades through CTEs, and yet you're saying in some ways that this is more a housing program. We're not expecting a great number of housing from this. I don't know what Josh Hanford's going to contribute to us. I think the real focus needs to be on getting the right number of students and the right coursework and the right supervisors. I think that falls under AOE's purview more than housing. Gus Seelig's going to be like the grease that gets the financing and puts the package deals together. But it's in the workforce training bill. It's about workforce, it's about education, it's about CTE. I'm surprised to hear you say that AOE won't have a big role here.
Well, programmatically, we would certainly. So I'm sorry if that was a little unclear, Chair Sorokin. But we don't have the capacity to run like a revolving fund, which I believe if this still is. So it's more the fiscal components are not something that we would be remotely prepared to run as a grant program that way. Would we be involved in assisting the field in terms of what might be the best way to approach in terms of programmatically or curriculum wise, what they would be doing? Sure, we're always there for that kind of work. I was just saying what I said to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And what you said is exactly what I was trying to get at, which is we're not expecting this to actually, because that had been some earlier conversation that this would be the way to solve definitively our housing problem. And so I think it's a potentially long-term solution toward that because it's actually investing in our workforce for those fields, but it isn't going to turn over something tomorrow. And so I just wanted to clarify that. It sounds like this committee already was full aware of what I was saying. So I'm sorry if I misinterpreted and was inadvertently insulting to your minds. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So you also said that you're fully supportive of this. Was this in the governor's budget?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It was the value, I think, was higher in the governor's budget, but the concept was definitely in the budget.
Right. Thank you, Heather. That's a good tee up. And Erica is the new director of the Hartford CTE. I haven't yet met you, Erica, but it's great to meet you here. And it was run for many years by a really fabulous person who I think would probably love this program. But would you be kind enough to chat with us about how you envision this program being used in your neck of the woods and or by other CTE centers? Because I think we have one other CTE center that isn't on holiday that I think River Valley might be able to join us for a short bit. But Erica, if you'd be kind enough to sort of be the face for our committee on how this would actually work in your CTE center.
Sure, I am happy to do that. So for us,
you just identify yourself for the record. That would be great.
Yep, I can do that. I'm Erica Schneider. I'm the director of the Hartford Area Career and Technology Center. And just a little introduction, since I haven't met folks on this committee before. I'm the director here. I'm relatively new to Vermont. I moved here in 2019, and I've got a fair amount of skin in the game because I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and so I'm very concerned about how we make all this work for them as they grow older. Thank you. In terms of how this program would work for us, for my center, I would actually we have a building trades program already. I would likely use this to add an additional instructor and add additional students. So it would actually be expanding the opportunities for students. So right now my program is capped at 16 students. If I had another instructor, we could have 32, and we could potentially, right now we work on building a new house. If we had 2 instructors, we could have some options to have students work on building a new house as well as working on some renovation projects. So that's kind of what we would be doing with that. Other centers that don't already build a house, they might use it to kind of start a program like that or to do some renovations. So I think they would use it for that. The one place where I'm not quite understanding how this would work is it says that it's a loan. So what I'm imagining, with like for the houses that we build, the cost is like $400,000 to build a house. And that's approximately like $300,000 for materials and permits and all that kind of stuff and the engineering and the site work. And then $100,000 per year for our staff member if we're talking about their salary and their benefits. So for me to build a house with it, I would need to borrow $400,000. But when we sold that house, we wouldn't be making that full $400,000 kind of because this is a learning opportunity. There's that cost of the instructor there. And so that was my one concern with it as a loan, is that I don't know if we could realistically pay back the entire loan if we were using it for things like personnel, which is, we would need to use it for things like personnel because we would need a person there. So that was my one thing that I wasn't sure about on that.
Yeah, and do you have a sense of from Gus's testimony about, I am not fully sure. I mean, Gus testified to this, and I wish in some ways you guys had testified together. Because I'm not sure I have an answer for you. But I do know that, does anybody here have a notion of how the loan, you know, a better sense of the financing of this through the VHCD? How it would work as a loan? I mean, because the output is sort of regular and I'm not fully sure on how the loan.
Well, I thought the $15 million was available to pay for the construction of the house, including the purchase of land. I think the way Gus described it is that upon resale of the house at some point, that money would come back into the fund to be able to use for future houses. So it's sort of like a non-interest bearing loan.
Revolving.
Yeah.
So more like a revolving.
Right. But he said it over time, it would probably lose some of its value.
Yes.
Yep.
I remember you saying that. So I think, Erica, that might be a good question actually for us to put you directly in touch with, and we need to clarify that too. So that's, thank you for that. So you already build one house a year, or one house. How long does it take you to build one house?
So we're a half-day program. We build one house every 2 years in the ideal world. And part of my hesitation about this as a loan is, there's the ideal world and the reality, like with COVID materials, like earlier this fall, there were no hammers available anywhere in the Upper Valley. And so like sometimes with construction and then also sometimes with education, we get behind on things. And so we, continue to move forward, but adding that time adds a bit of personnel expense. So that's kind of the part where I was just concerned about seeing it as a loan versus as a grant. And I love the idea of it being like a grant and then still repaying, part of that when we sell it. But a loan sounds to me like, ooh, we'd have to do that whole thing, which would make it significantly less appealing for me.
I'm happy to take on clarifying that because I agree with you. Let me clarify that with Gus and get back to you because we need to do that. So you do, in an ideal world, with hammers. Every ideal world has a hammer. I have a hammer.
Won't get distracted.
I know it's easy to get distracted by education. You could build up one house every 2 years. Do you also see this as being able to renovate, in a quicker fashion, and apartments or buildings that could be brought back online for housing that are either blighted or vacant? Do you see that being useful in Hartford also?
Yeah, I think that would be really useful. For us, specifically, it would allow us to expand our program because right now we're pretty committed to, finishing the house that we're on and then the next house. But if we can hire another instructor, then we can do some of that renovation. And we, just driving around in White River Junction, there's certainly properties that we could work with. And there's some local entities like the Twin Pines Housing that works to do affordable housing that could potentially be pretty good partners for us.
And cover. We have an active habitat and cover program in White River. Heather, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, or just a question, because as Erica is speaking, it occurs to me that what a great opportunity for students, for instance, that you have a half-time program. And so I don't know enough about construction, but I'm thinking that what you need to actually build from nothing and what you need in terms of skills to actually renovate are similar, but also different enough that would be really cool for students.
Yeah, I think it'd be great for students to have the opportunity to do both. Right now, we don't have the capacity to do both, but this would potentially allow that to happen.
And I guess my final question for you is involves summer jobs. Would this ideally, would this also, if you were in the midst of renovating or building a house, could this also be a job opportunity for students in the summer?
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, I think we have a lot of kids that work, already doing construction in the summer. So if we were able to provide a competitive wage to what they would be getting elsewhere, we have kids that would love to do that. The harder part is just figuring out the staffing issue of that and making sure that additional work for our staff member, that wasn't an issue with like the union contract, because they would be getting paid in the summer when other teachers aren't getting paid. So that would be potentially a barrier, but I think we'd love to have a staff member do that with students, a smaller group of students, and have them paid over the summer. I think some students would really like that.
Oh, I hadn't thought about it. Well, thank you. Anybody have any other questions for, yeah.
So when we had Gus Seelig in yesterday from DHCB, he mentioned other great programs, Vermont Works for Women, resource. They are elsewhere in this bill getting resources potentially for helping with similar programs. And my sense is that one of the barriers they may face is that they aren't accredited to establish, credit bearing opportunities for those folks. Is there more that you feel like you could do to help reach out and partner with programs like that so that the young people who find that door in can get credit without it having to sort of fall under your instruction?
Potentially. I mean, we have a fair amount of collaborations with some of those organizations anyway. The one thing that gets a little tricky is that we recommend credit to our sending schools. And so a lot of that would depend on whether our sending schools see that as valid. I know that there's a pretty large commitment to work-based learning around the state, and a number of schools would do that, but that would have to be kind of a partnership thing between us, looking at what the credits potentially would be, but then also the sending school, whether they would accept that as a credit.
Okay, so somebody has to be enrolled in a sending school to participate in this?
They do not have to be enrolled in a sending school to participate with us. Like we can have we have some homeschooled students.
Okay.
Yep.
And Erica, you run an adult CTE program, don't you?
We do. It's been on hiatus for COVID, but we are in the middle of getting that back up and running for next fall.
And do we see possibly some of those adults in partnering with this? Maybe some of the summer moving the project forward could be some of those adult CTE students.
Yeah, there's a lot of appeal to having some adults be a part of this because adults have potentially more time in the day. If we could get a crew of adults like learning how to do some renovations, like that crew could, accomplish more than the students, than the 17 and 18-year-olds we have could accomplish, but still be learning. I mean, there's a number of people that use CT centers to think about new careers. And so they could be learning as a part of that.
Well, I think this is rich with opportunity. So Woodstock, Keisha, is a sending school to Erica's program.
Right. No, I guess I was just curious about adults, about people who fall through the cracks, and if there's a way to make sure that you're able to help more programs that we're funding in other parts of this bill access credit, who might not have credit bearing opportunities but are paying people, which is an important benefit, but doesn't quite give them the long-term support that credits do.
Mm-hmm.
But when an adult graduates from your adult CT program in construction, they have a certificate. I mean, they're
right. They might find another way in though and do another training. And do you feel like you have confidence that with the partnerships that you have with the groups, some of the groups that we've just mentioned, that you're able to give them credit for some of their programs?
I feel like I don't know enough to speak to the details about that, being relatively new in my position.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to get the committee some of that information from some of the other tech directors.
Yeah, I'd love to know if you all are already giving credit out for partnership programs and what that looks like, basically.
So,
and Heather,
you want to add to that? And then
Yeah, because I think that we're mixing up credit with industry recognized credentials. So the only entity, and I think we want it this way, that gives out credit are our high schools. We want our folks to have a high school diploma at the end of it. But there are industry recognized credentials that are not credits, but they're very useful and practical in terms of a student, whether they're secondary CTE or adult CTE, that they can have access to. And so I just want to clarify that, because sometimes this has been an issue that is challenging. So I think we would have to have a much deeper conversation about whether we want non-public school entities actually providing diplomas. And I think that would be something that would certainly be quite radical. And I'm not sure, Senator Rahm, that's what you meant, but I do think that's sometimes that's where the rub is. It's in who actually provides the high school diploma. And that's what Erica meant when she said, like, it depends on the sending high school, which we have a local control state. And so the high school dictates what meets criteria for its high school diploma.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world has changed since I graduated college. I don't know, I feel like somehow old, because when I went to college, it was called credit. So, like when you're getting your AA or getting, I don't feel like this industry recognized credential thing feels new to me in terms of that's the only path forward. I would think people still want to get their AA or potentially another degree that bears credit. Where credit is still in the conversation. I didn't think credit was just for high school.
Yeah, I think that's the whole stackable credentials work. And we've been working on that piece and career pathways for quite a while now. So yes, I think when the details though of who gets what is part of what, frankly, this work that we're trying to actually accomplish would get at, which is looking at the funding, looking at those industry recognized credentials and what is the best option for a variety of different types of students. So I do think we share the same goal. And I think the work that we're contemplating and wanting to do back to section, number 3 in this bill would actually accomplish some of that. It's really trying to figure out once and for all what is the best way moving forward so that we do have flexibility in terms of access to CTE, both secondary and adult.
Great, thank you. I think, unless there are other questions, I think, Erica, we need to get you, I think we need to clarify the loan versus grant piece here. So we can get back to you on that. And but I think this is good. Anything else? And then I think we may take a short break before Tracy Dolan joins us. Tracy's with us. Okay, great. So thank you both. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Erica. Lovely to meet you, Erica.
Anytime. Thank you all.
And Heather, we're going to look for language from you. If you could get that to us, maybe tomorrow, that would be great.
I'm going to go get it to you right now.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Instant gratification. Oh, yikes. We have, Erica, if you stay on one sec, we have Derek, who I believe works with Scott Farr at River Valley Technical Center in CTE Center in Springfield. So Derek, we have just, we have a few more minutes before our next witness joins us, and I'm just curious. Thank you for joining us at the drop of a hat. I'm sorry Scott's away, but there we are. I don't know if you've had a chance to review section 16 of this bill, of the H703 Workforce Development Bill, but this is have you had a chance to review it?
I have looked through it, but I don't know that I identified section 16 specifically. Let me get there.
Section 16 is the $15 million program to have the VHCB, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, partner with the CTE centers to really expand our home building, contracting, educational experience with CTE students, both adult and younger students. It's really an education project to teach construction and trades, but building housing and invest in our workforce. It invests in new housing. The governor supports it, and from what I understand, the CTE centers do as well. And we heard from Erica that this would enable her to possibly add a new staff member, double her students, and she just needs to clarify the funding piece, whether it's a loan or a grant. If you haven't had a chance to look at section 16.
I just looked at it and we've talked about it, me
Okay.
and Scott. So I think this is a great opportunity for some centers. In terms of RVTC, we build modular houses on site, and it dramatically increases the amount of time students can spend on task if we don't have to transport them.
Right.
So while this might work great for some places, I don't know that this is an opportunity that RVTC will be able to capitalize on.
Okay. And are there other CTE centers for whom that would be? I mean, you could partner with, and you're already building modular homes. How many houses are you able to build in a year, or how many are you able to complete? What's your time frame on those?
We turn around one house a year, and we put them on the market. Before they're built, we have a bid process. People put in their offers. Whoever gives us the best bid, it's usually a percentage over cost on the house. And then we get as much done as we can in the year. So typically that looks like framed, roofed, windows in, basically weather tight but not sided. And for us, those sometimes it's easy to find some people who want to buy it, and sometimes it's harder. Right now, I think it'll probably be easier. A few years ago, it was a challenge.
And what's your cost per house roughly?
Oh, it used to be about 40,000 before transportation costs, but I have no idea what that number is going to be right now. The prices are changing so quickly; it's hard to stay on top of it.
You were able to build a whole house for $40,000?
That doesn't include the foundation, septic. That's just the house on a trailer getting moved, and then it has to be transported and set.
Right. So, but possibly this program could help pay for some of that work. I mean, this is not, I don't think it's they're mutually exclusive, building modular units. I mean, it's conceivable you could partner in this program as well.
It is conceivable. I don't know the specifics. My understanding was that this was to rehabilitate homes that were in really rough shape.
It could be either. It could be either rehabilitation or it could be building new.
I know some of our houses, we're working with a person who's made bids out of Massachusetts for Habitat for Humanity. They're having trouble finding a lot of volunteers. So the person we're working with right now's thought is that they could purchase a house that's all framed and ready to go, and then it could be finished by the volunteers and dramatically decrease the number of hours that are involved in the process. So we could totally do something like that here in the state of Vermont, and that would be an awesome opportunity for everybody.
Great. Thank you. Erica, anything else before we move on to Tracy? Anything else, Derek? If you have anything else that you and Scott want to add, if you'd be kind enough to email us, that would be great.
Yeah, if we think of something, we will.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Great to see you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Tracy, we're going to shift.
I just had one question on the section while we're on it. I noticed, not for them, but I noticed that there's a 5% to the VHCP for the cost of administration.
Yeah.
That's $750,000. Seems like a lot, given that they're contracting out to tech centers who are going to absorb a lot of the oversight costs. So I think we might want to ask that question.
I have to clearly be in touch with Jess about the loan piece. So,
Well, I think basically the way it's going to work is I think the CTE centers will buy the property or dilapidated property, rehab it, build it, and sell it. So Gus will be financing it at no interest, and then when the proceeds come back in, they'll go into the revolving loan, but because it's all younger people who don't have skills and they need a lot of supervision,
Right.
the cost of building that house would probably be more than the value it can sell for them. And so that's why it will go down over time. I think
Right.
that's the way they learn.
Where's that 5%?
It's on page 28. It says not more than 5%.
Okay, got it.
Well,
I mean, that would be fine if they were doing everything. But, you know, they're more like an executive role or something, you know, a lot of administrative stuff, you know, ordering supplies, that kind of stuff is going to be done by
the CTE center,
CTEs. Yes.
I think that's another question. We should, yeah, I wish we'd seen that yesterday. So-
Issue of the cost of sale, whether they're going to sell directly or if this is going to, again, use realtor and so on, more commissions involved.
And I think that we didn't really address the issue of the ever-present issue of perpetual affordability.
Actually, that was addressed because we talked about, these are going to be more expensive. They just, and we talked about that, remember? And people thought this wasn't, and Gus addressed this, is that we didn't discuss the perpetual affordability. We just
That's
discussed that the education experience was worth the cost
Right.
of what the house was going to cost, and we couldn't necessarily make it an affordable house.
I don't think these are going to be selling as expensive homes. I think they're going to be expensive to construct because you're using students and you need supervisors and
Yeah.
all that stuff. That's part of the workforce.
Well, I think that's another question for Gus, is it makes sense to build in perpetual affordability? So Tracy, whoops, did we lose everybody?
We lost Tracy, but she's trying to come back in right now.
Right, okay, so
I was
now,
wondering,
just,
you know, if you took a house and you just kind of laid out the house is being constructed here, and you look at all the elements of cost that we're adding into it for this, and then sit back and weigh that in terms of the cost of the educational opportunity, I just wonder what a chart would look like showing all those various cost components.
so, yeah, I mean, you have to track it over time, because if you actually create a whole bunch of new contractors and plumbers and electricians, then you have to track it over time to see what their value back to the state is in terms of their revenue, of their income. I mean, I think that's a
Just starting
big
with the
question.
cost of- Just starting with the cost of the house though, which is what we're still is kind of
Right.
the first step.
It's
Yeah,
not gonna
At
be
some
a
point,
cheap
you gotta
house.
look at what the return on investment is and model that.
I mean, I think it's a good idea, but, you know, I think we should ask the question. I think these CTEs have built some of these houses.
Yes,
Maybe
that's
they
what we're hearing.
sold them and maybe they're costing them out. and-
That's how they
The
help
problem is
finance.
they're the hidden costs. The cost of the sale is one thing, but there may be in fact hidden costs by things like this 5%.
So we have Tracy here for us. These are good questions, and I think we should answer. Tracy Dolan, welcome. Are we gonna see you, or are you just gonna be an iPhone?
I know she's having some difficulties with the Zoom connection. I've sent her the phone number as well, so we'll see how connected she can get.
So Tracy, just to prep you, is addressing section 1, the ARPA. Excuse me, going to AHS to provide grants to refugees.
Do you want to take a break and I'll try to get her back?
That would